Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
Do many people know that this personality, Jonathan Granoff, is Sheikh Ahamed Muhaiyaddeen as well?
I'm a brother, and names and titles are really not beneficial. What is beneficial is the admonition of the Rasul, may blessings be upon him, that we are all like teeth on a comb, and that he emphasized so often the equality of people, the inherent dignity of every single person, including people who didn't agree with him, that he treated with so much respect and dignity. So I don't really like, I think titles can often be they can be a barrier between people. So the great Sufi teacher that I studied and lived with, Bawa Muhaiyaddeen, who was a khutub, meaning that he was in a state of loving all lives as his own. He often would say, separate from yourself that which separates you from others. So titles often separate people.
That's right.
So anyway, I don't want to be, I don't like the idea of being a sheikh or anything other than a brother. Otherwise, the great burden of arrogance could be on my shoulders, and that would be something I don't want to carry.
That's right. So, brother, let's begin from the childhood. Where you born?
Oh, my.
A little about your family, a little about your neighborhood, and a little about your school days.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1948. My mother was one of the most famous singers in the world at the time. She was a pop star in popular culture. And my father was a publicist. He helped make people famous. So he had people that became very famous, like Frank Sinatra. I don't know if they would be famous in South Asia, but in America, in the Western world, the people who were his clients were the most famous people, became the most famous people, movie stars like that. And my mother, there was an issue as to my mother's health. And so she decided that she wanted to make sure that they wouldn't abort my birth because of her health. And she went to a Catholic hospital, the French hospital in New York City. So right away, there was a commitment to God. My mother wanted to make sure that she risked her own health to give birth to me. So I have to think very seriously that I was brought into this world by another human being who placed my life ahead of theirs. And then I think, a lot of mothers have that feeling that they would give up everything for their children. And the sign of someone really in the deen is to have that feeling of love and affection that you learn in the family and expand it. So as I grew up, I was able to see my mother was a very public person and had an incredible amount of joy in entertaining and singing for people and connecting with them on the level of the heart. Most of her songs were about love songs, love between men and women, but love nevertheless, and uplifting. All the songs she sang were uplifting in some way. So I got to grow up backstage in a way and see literally millions of people venerate my mother and see my father helping make people famous. And that was a very interesting experience, really a very big blessing to see that. And of course, I saw that it was just my mom. It was just mom. But if we went out to dinner or someplace public, people gathered around, they wanted her autograph.
She was a famous personality.
Very, very famous. And my father helped create a lot of culture, a lot of television and music, and they were involved in what we call in the United States show business.
So the couple was famous, the couple was successful.
Yes.
And here comes Jonathan.
Well, if you were to read my mother's obituary, my mother's name was Kitty Callan. It talks about how at one point in her career, she was to sing for the royal family in Britain at, I think it's the Palladium is the main theater there, and the Queen, and her voice failed her. Her voice, she couldn't sing, and for years she had problems. And I was about 11 or 12 at the time, about 11, I think, and it's in the New York Times, which is a paper of record, that I said to her, "Stop going to all of these doctors. Go to God. You got to go to God, because God gave you your voice. God gave you your beauty. God gave you the gift, and that's the only way you'll get your voice back." And I think my mother did, and she had another resurgence of a successful career again in the 1960s. So so I saw the roller coaster of the world, and I saw the cost that fame has for somebody. It's a very big burden, because fame is an illusion. Fame is an illusion. Yeah, and people project onto the famous person all sorts of characteristics that are just illusions. And I saw that, and we also, because my parents were in that world, my home life was filled with famous people. I think I was about 12 when I realized that everyone's parents were not on television. Because the people that I saw around the house, I saw them on television as well. So my worldview, because you know, as a child, you only think the whole world's the way you see it. In my world, I thought everybody got to be on TV because the people I saw were on TV. It was kind of the illusory upbringing I had of privilege, tremendous privilege. I can remember my father helping to put together a rally for then candidate for President John Kennedy, and he had Frank Sinatra. He helped bring very famous performers, the most famous in America. And I was just a kid, and I was on the stage with these people. And when I think back on it, I realized that I didn't have any sense of anything special, because when you're a child, what you do is what you do. You don't think of it as making, you still go through all of the insecurities that a child goes through coming into adolescence, trying to be accepted by their friends, trying to find an identity, etc. But I never, like many children in the world today, I never had to worry about security. I never had to worry about where my next meal would be. I never had to worry about, I didn't have to think about whether people liked me or didn't like me. I just presumed everybody got along. And my father was much more politically active than my mother. He was involved in the civil rights struggle, the struggle for racial equality in the United States. And he produced some protest songs demanding justice and equality for people of all different races and colors. And I was also blessed with, very much blessed with, because my mother was popular in so many different ethnic and cultural groups. She was a public figure. I saw how she, and it was her business as well, how she treated all the audiences and all of her fans with care and affection. So I grew up presuming that it's normal to not have racial or religious prejudice, that it's normal not to view your religion and your culture as superior to others, that this was normal to celebrate diversity.
That's beautiful.
And my grandparents were from the Ukraine, and Jews, they were Jews in the Ukraine, were blamed for anything that the Tsar didn't like. So every couple of decades, they go and kill Jews. That's the state blamed them. So when he was 17, my grandfather walked from Kiev to Odessa. He walked across the Ukraine and took a boat to the United States all by himself to escape religious persecution. Now, my wife, with whom I have had a blessed marriage for 44 years, my beautiful wife, her family are Armenians from Turkey. And they came to the United States similarly to escape religious oppression, the genocide that the Turks perpetrated against the Armenians. And in her family, the historical legacy of escaping genocide and coming to America as a land of freedom is a very important story. And in my family, coming from Russia, both of my grandparents, to escape oppression is a really important story. So on both my three sons grow up with both of their parents having a story of escaping religious persecution, seeking religious liberty and freedom and human rights in America. That's the America that's the America I grew up in, and that's the America that I believe in today. But not just America. I believe that religious bigotry and prejudice is certainly not something that God wants of us.
So true, so true. And when did you meet Bawa?
I met him
in America or in Sri Lanka?
Yes, I met him in America. Yes.
In America, okay.
And
so you were not a part of group who visited him first in Sri Lanka?
No, I met him first when he came to America. First time he came. Yeah, just shortly after he came here.
Okay.
And I would say, as to this issue of religious tolerance, there's an ayat in Quran where Allah says, from a seed I made a man and a woman, and from a man and a woman I made the peoples amongst you, that you would come to realize one another. The verb is arif, which is not just to know, it's a deeper kind of knowledge. It's like the knowledge of self. It's not knowing as an object. Let me give an example of what kind of knowing that marifat, or that knowing is. You know that you see, but the thing with which you see, you cannot see. You know that you touch, but the thing inside of the hand whereby you touch, you cannot feel that. You cannot feel the thing that's touching or see the thing that's touching. You know that you have consciousness and awareness, but if we cut Pir, Mudassir, or me open, we won't see consciousness and awareness. You'll just see bones and skin and nerves. So that part of us, that is the most important thing for us to know. The term for knowing that is marifat. It's a level of spiritual awakening and understanding. And that's the verb in the ayat as to how we should understand people of different faith traditions and different cultures. So right away, it's Allah saying, it's His intention that we have diversity. That's the first point. The second, then after that, it says, and the best amongst you is the one with the most taqwa. Well, I wouldn't even try to venture a translation of the word taqwa into English. It's simply that we don't have a word in English, but there's a few words that give you an idea. It would be a sense of awe and reverence and humility and consciousness of the presence and beauty and power and intimacy of God in our life. And what comes from that is a conduct avoiding wrongdoing, avoiding hurting other people, avoiding arrogance, avoiding pride and anger and hastiness. It comes with a awareness of the importance of following kindness and compassion. So then it goes from, I made the peoples amongst you that you would realize one another. The best amongst you is the one with the most God consciousness and awareness of God and awe and fear of wrongdoing. And then then Allah in the first person says, I'm all awareness and knowing. Not I'm aware of not like he's a separate being in another dimension, aware of what's going on in the world. He places himself in this within awareness and knowing.
That's true.
Which means that the awareness and knowing of both the saint and the sinner, the mu'min and the person who's not a believer, that they have inherent dignity within them. There's a hadith where the Prophet, may blessings be upon him, talks about a non-believer a beggar coming to see the Prophet Ibrahim, and Ibrahim turns him away. And then Allah speaks to him and says, for 70 years, I've taken care of him and you can't even give him a meal. And there's so many stories making this point that all lives are Allah's lives and that he is the life, he's the power sustaining all lives, and thus all lives deserve our respect and dignity. Bawa, this great Sufi master that I met, he went much further. He, having realized fully the presence of God within himself, experienced it and lived it as unified with all other lives. So he treated everyone with the same love and caring that every mother treats their own child. He treated everyone as part of himself. And the amount of joy that he exuded, the amount of sweetness and positive energy that was around him was luminous, as bright as the brightest, brighter than anything that the eyes could see, brighter than the sun. And his humility was such that you could not get below him, because he was always helping everybody else. And his majesty of repose and dignity was such that you could not get above him, because he had no needs in the world. He was in a state of baka, of total union and fulfillment. So first he had gone through fana, of extinction of the illusion of separation, and then he was in a state of permanence in compassion, in Rahman and Rahim. And so his joy was to remind people of our inherent dignity. Sort of the very first part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the most important part of the Deen, which is the most important part of the Deen is to know oneself, and through that to know God. Because if we don't know what we're saying, if we say kalima la ilaha illallah, or in another language, whether it's Hebrew and Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, it's the same as Kufu Allahu Achad. It's Echad or Achad. One means one, regardless of the tradition. If you don't do it with knowledge, if you don't know what you're doing, it has no nourishment in it. It has no meaning. So we, as human beings, we're not dogs. You know, we're not just trained to go here, eat like this, live like this, bow like this, get up like this. That's what animals do. We're human beings. And as human beings, we have to pursue knowledge and our lives in a human being way.
That's right.
And what is the first thing in doing that? It is in the ayats of Quran begin, Bismillah, I probably don't pronounce it correctly because I am, it's not my native language, but Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. in the reality, let's say in the reality of the presence and the reality of the unity of God, found in finding it, living it, bringing it into your being of compassion and mercy. So why is that there all the time in the, in the Holy Scripture? What is the point? I'm not just saying it once at the beginning, but over and over. It is that whatever we do, we try to do it conscious of the blessing of God. So I have this friend, Pir Mudassir, and I asked him, what is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? And he said, well, it is that it is knowing with the awareness of the blessing of God. And so then I said, well, could that apply also to vision, not just intelligence? We thought about it, and he said, yeah. So, and I thought about that, and I realized, well, if I watch a sunset or a sunrise, and I'm in a state of anger and hostility, I don't see the beauty of it. I don't see it. If I am in a state of anxiety and hostility, and I see another human being, I don't see their dignity. I don't see them. I don't really see them. I'm just seeing my own mind. But if I'm in a state of love and satisfaction and gratitude and peace, in a state of humanity, in the state of the azma of Allah, of a state of beauty, of amal, and strength, of iman, of strength of faith, dalal, but mainly in a state of Rahman and Rahim, and I look at a sunrise or a sunset or a flower or a tree or an animal or another human being, I see wondrous, amazing beauty. So I met a man who lived in that state of gratitude and beauty, and he said, "This is what it is to be human. This is something that we all have a right to. We all have a right to that beauty." So I met him at a young enough age that he could save me from a lot of dangerous mistakes that I definitely would have made had I not had that guidance.
Wonderful. And Bawa Muhaiyaddeen Qadri was from Sri Lanka, basically. And
well, he was discovered in the jungles of Sri Lanka. But as we came to know him, I don't think there was any part of the planet Earth that he wasn't aware of, that he hadn't been to. Yeah, he didn't speak much about himself. I lived with him for 15 years. He wasn't at all concerned about himself. That he'd sort of given that away. But there wasn't a tradition or culture of which he wasn't intimately aware of and able to unpack the wisdom within it. In other words, he wasn't bound by culture or history.
That's right. That's so right.
He had a heart that duplicates the planet Earth. It doesn't have any borders.
True. So true. So true. And I'm blessed that I have visited his Mizar so many times in Philadelphia. And I remember that your introduction with you was because of Bawa. And that was the bond which we had very first day, and still that fragrance of love of that bond is there in our relationship and our friendship and our brotherhood. How was Bawa? How was Bawa with you? Because I have seen a picture at your home. You remember? You invited me for lunch and we had lunch there, and there was a picture where Baba is like kissing on your head, or there is a picture. So
well,
yeah,
there's lots of pictures. I mean, I was with him a lot.
So you were very close with Baba. You were among the few who were very close with Baba.
Well, I don't know if that would not be true. Okay. In fact, once I asked him, "You're leaving?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're dying, and I have a long way to journey, and I feel lost without your presence." And he said, "Well, what's your problem?" I said, well, I'm realizing, I mean, you're very, very old and you're dying. He was dying. And he looked at his hand and he turned it over like this and he said, well, I'm just turning my hand over. I'm just taking this shirt off. He said, do you think that the people that have seen this form have seen the guide, have seen the teacher, have seen the guru, have seen the sheikh, have seen me? He said, no, this is just a plastic bag that I use to carry things. And then he said, when I drop this, it will be much easier for me to teach my, oh, and then he said, do you think the people in the room who've seen this have seen me? And then he said, after I drop this body, it will be much easier for me to teach my children from within the heart. And so part of my job is to remind people that the teacher is not a form, just as their own consciousness and own life and soul and nur is not a form. Allah is not a form, and the human is made in the image of the formless. And the teacher is someone who's realized the fullness of their infinite soul dimension, which is in awal and akhir and dunya, but is also in the infinite. And my experience since he left his body has been that the guidance of the blessing is not diminished at all. And another thing that I've come to understand is that I understood him, this as a awliya Allah, as a saint of God, and as an example, but that he often said, the Rasul, may blessings be upon him, said there were 124,000 prophets. And there have been many other kutubs and saints. And as Allah says, they all brought the same teaching. The teaching of Tawheed, the teaching of loving kindness and mercy and love. And when you study the lives of the Sufi saints, and you study the lives of the Catholic saints, and you study the lives of the Hindu wise people and jnanis, and you study the Buddha, and you study Socrates, the great philosophers of the West, you see similarities that are unmistakable. And you see ethical principles that they lived by that are the same. The golden rule, to treat others as one wants to be treated. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. And why is that? Because the most important thing they all talk about is the oneness of life. First, the unity of the human family, and then the deeper underlying unity of life, the unity of the unity of the light of the soul. And they all talk about the experience of that as transformative and as worthy of our pursuit, and as the why of the spiritual practices that they instituted. Why one bows down, why one fasts, why one remembers, why one recites. That's the why. And the why is to have that transformative experience of the oneness and unity of life. And that would be something along the lines of every wave is unique. Your face is beautiful, but it's yours. My face is what it is. It's my face. And everyone listening, everyone has a miraculously unique face. Everyone's story is unique, and they come into the world and are sustained in the world by the same power, but the expression, the sifat, the expression of that zat, of that essence, is different. Just like every wave on the ocean is unique. No two waves are the same in size or dimension. No two waves are the same.
Yeah.
So,
there's a question for you.
But let me just finish.
Yeah, please.
But the wave only realizes its reality when it bows down and splashes back into the ocean. It was always one with the ocean, but it doesn't realize that it's one with the ocean until its arrogance bows down,
Yeah.
and then it becomes one with the ocean. So Baba Farid, buried in Pakpatan,
Yeah.
was a human being who became one with the ocean of the deen. Khaja Muinuddin Chishti in Ajmer,
Yeah.
in India, was a human being who bowed down and became the ocean. Bawa Muhaiyaddeen was a human being who bowed down and became the ocean. And what I've discovered is the ocean and the message is one. And they all say it is one. And we, as believers, as mu'min, we have to have hearts that are like theirs. Hearts that are one, that are pure, that are clean. And what cleans the heart is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Beginning that, what you said, Pierre, what you said to me, to be aware of the blessing of God in whatever we do. To be aware of that. And when you become aware of it, you then become grateful. If you have gratitude, you can't have anger. If you have gratitude, you can't have pride. If you have gratitude, you can't have prejudice. If you have gratitude, you don't hurt other people. So it is that gratitude, that perpetual gratitude of shukur, that's the evidence of the path of Sufism. So here's a question. How can we learn to practice Sufism, deal with emotional and behavioral problems among many due to today's challenging life? Deal with emotional problems among many. Well, first thing is, to answer my sister's question, is not to take on the emotional problems of other people until you've cleared your own emotional problems. So the question is befuddled a little bit. If you ask, how do I clear my emotional, spiritual traumas and problems? That's a different answer than how do I help others do it? Although the two are dramatically interconnected, you won't find the solution to your own drama and your own problems until you care for others as well, until you have compassion. So the paradox that the mind doesn't get, but Iman does when you put it into practice, is if you feel the suffering of others and you care about other people with real love and selflessness without expectation or judgment, then your problems get taken care of by God. So the Prophet himself said, not one of you is a mu'min until he wants for others what he wants for himself. So bringing into practice the golden rule, but it's not a thought. You have to actually feel for others. And then the preoccupation with yourself diminishes. And then you start becoming abd, to serve and care. But yeah, but the first part is to do an inventory, a serious inventory of your own qualities. So how do you know what kind of qualities you have? Well, here's a way of a method of doing that. If you are hungry and you drive in Lahore while you're hungry, there are so many restaurants, so many street vendors. Everywhere you go, there's people selling food. And everywhere you turn, there's food, there's people selling food. But if you drive through Lahore and you're not hungry, you don't see it. You see something else. So from that, you can extrapolate and realize that our intentions determine largely our perceptions. And our intentions come from the state, our niyat comes from the state of our heart. So if you're seeing a world in which mothers love their children, in which teachers really try to teach their students, in which doctors try to heal, in which businessmen try to do fair dealing, the normal activities that human beings have are integrated with the Azma of Allah. The marketplace functions because people trust the fair dealing of other people. If you don't deal fairly in the marketplace, people don't buy your stuff. Marriages work when the spouses understand the value of sacrifice, of caring for their spouse in thick and thin, in joy and sorrow. Families work together when people give of one another. That's how life works, and it's there all the time. Also, there's evil in the world, but evil is not what keeps the world sustained. Evil leads to suffering. Evil leads to separations. So if your heart is clear, and you're in the light, you can see the nature of darkness, but you're not attracted to it, so you're not in turmoil. If you're attracted to service and loving kindness, God will provide opportunities for you to express those good qualities. This is my direct experience, and it's consistent with all of the teachings, that if you make it your niyat, your intention, to serve compassion, to serve salam, to serve peace, to serve goodness, to serve others, to love, God will provide the opportunities for that to happen. And you don't have to worry about it. Just like we don't have to worry about breathing.
Yeah.
God will breathe you. And the breath of life is something that we should be very aware of. And bring our breathing into the remembrance and gratitude, and thank God for every breath. Thank God for every breath.
That's right. That's so right. So from this spiritual journey, let's explore one more aspect of your life. The Jonathan Granoff, president of Global Security Institute, a famous lawyer, having a great influence in United Nations, working with so many known personalities, even few presidents. Tell us a little about Global Security Institute.
Okay. Well, the Global Security Institute was started in a conversation in San Francisco in the same hotel where the United Nations Charter was done, the Fairmont Hotel. It was actually in the same penthouse where the charter was worked on and the first iterations of it took place. So that was kind of interesting. It was at an initiative called the State of the World Forum, and there was a senator from California, Senator Alan Cranston, who invited me to a luncheon with Mikhail Gorbachev and General Lee Butler, who had been head of the United States nuclear arsenal, and Richard Butler, who at the time was head of the Special Commission on Iraq to disarm Saddam Hussein of his weapons of mass destruction, and George Bunn, who was a lawyer who helped write the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And in that luncheon, there was a discussion about how several things. One is that if we solve every problem on the planet, but we don't solve the nuclear threat correctly, it doesn't matter. If we don't get this one correct, humanity will end the future, and that this is not acceptable.
That's right.
Now, General Butler was head of at one time was head of the U.S. complete nuclear arsenal. He wrote the operational plans for the use of nuclear weapons. But then he went to Russia once, and he saw the people that these weapons were aimed at. He realized this was madness. That if we use these weapons, civilization is over, and we have to have another course. And Mikhail Gorbachev, as you know, met with Ronald Reagan in 1985, and they concluded a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. So let's start working on getting rid of them. So at that meeting, Senator Cranston decided, let's make an organization focused on promoting the elimination of nuclear weapons. And that was the late 1990s. And so that's how it began, and he asked me to be one of the leaders in it. And I was practicing law at the time, but it was, how do you say no to such an opportunity in life? Anyway, I had a lucrative law practice, but I don't anymore. But I have a very fulfilling use of my talents and skills to work for peace. You know, in your region, 70% of the malnourished children in the world live in South Asia.
Yeah.
And 30% of the children in both Pakistan and India are malnourished. They don't have enough nourishment. So for them, their lives are already tremendously impaired. It's as if a war has been fought and they lost. For them, they're starting out with a tremendous burden of health issues and cognitive issues and emotional issues, hunger. There's nothing more traumatic for a child than living without the security of food and shelter.
Yep.
And this is in both countries. And yet enormous, not just amounts of money, not just money, but mainly enormous amounts of intellectual capacity and emotional energy is being wasted in separating people from Pakistan and India. It seems to me that if people, when you see people from Pakistan and India here in the United States, we can't tell the difference. And they hang out together. The Pakistani and Indian businessmen hang out together. They send their kids to the same schools. They like the same food that's very similar. They have tea together. They share so much of the same cultural sensibilities. And then you see, that here you have two nations squared off with nuclear arms, which if they used them, and fully used them, they would throw off at least 5 million tons of soot into the stratosphere. And here I am near New York City. The ozone layer here would be destroyed, and agriculture here would be destroyed, and the whole of civilization would be destroyed. So what happens in Lahore and Delhi and Karachi and Mumbai is in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
What nuclear weapons have done, just like the COVID virus, is they've shown us that we are all interconnected. We are all one human family. And so we have to use the traditions of spirituality that we've been given not to be barriers of separation. So, the Prophet, may blessings be upon him, is identified as a rahmatul alameen.
Yeah.
He is to be a blessing upon everybody.
Yeah.
Blessings seek the well-being of others. Blessings seek to make sure that others are fed and clothed and housed, not dominated, not manipulated. And then he also said, let there be no compulsion in the deen. You have to come out of freedom. Freedom's really important in his message.
Yeah.
And so all of the teachings are right there, but you've got to dig a little bit. You've got to dig a little bit. So we take the golden rule, right? So the Prophet laid out the golden rule. Jesus laid out the golden rule. Buddha laid out the golden rule. Socrates laid out the golden rule. Hillel, every religion you find one of the wise saying, treat others as you want to be treated. Don't treat others as you don't want to be treated. Yeah. The lives of others are part of your life. It's some way they describe it. Nuclear weapons violate that principle. The idea that 9 countries can say they're good for us and not good for everybody violates that principle. So we know that it violates the principle. And the principle means something. And the principle that Muhammad laid out, the principle that Jesus laid out, the principle that Moses laid out, the principle that Buddha laid out, the principle that Socrates laid out, the principle that Lao Tzu and Confucius, the principle of the Seneca, Native American elders, the principle of the golden rule is violated by these weapons. And if it's violated, we know that if we violate the wisdom that's been given to us by the wise of the world, by all the Sufi saints, that suffering will happen. And we also know that if we follow their teaching, that joy, health, well-being, Peace of mind is the consequence. So you asked about the UN. So I had the privilege of actually helping to organize a celebration of the 800th Urs. That Urs in Sufism, for people who don't know, the word is Arabic, the word means wedding. So when a great Sufi saint who is no longer attached to the world drops his body and his spirit and soul completely merge without any veil with the oneness of God, it's called a celebration and a wedding. But it's not to celebrate them, it's to celebrate the achievement of the beauty of their lives and the example. It's not to worship them, it's to worship the living message that's in you and me today as we breathe, that God is giving us this heartbeat in this moment in his life. It's to celebrate love and compassion today, now, in our lives. It's to remind us of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, God, mercy, compassion. It's to bring it into the present and to celebrate that a human being did this as an example, that we should do this too. So, 800th anniversary, we worked with the government of India because Khaja is buried in Ajmer, and we had a celebration. And of course, at the time, actually, the ambassador of Pakistan, when we organized it, Ambassador Haruni, was a lover of Khaja and supported the whole thing 100%. So, of course, we had a big delegation from Pakistan, and and it was a celebration of the Sufi message of love. The ambassador of India's wife brought roses and put roses on everybody's seat. And if you Google love India UN Khaja, you'll find this video of it. The UN streams the video, and the Qawwalis from Ajmer, came and played a concert at the UN. And the Deputy Secretary General, and we shared poems from Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, Muhaiyaddeen ibn Arabi, and of course the message of Khaja is the same message as Baba Farid, which is love toward all, malice toward none. And it was packed. It was packed with diplomats. And sometimes, God is always present, of course.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
But sometimes there's something happens that's very special, and the beauty and the unity and the joy just seems to fill the room. And that happened at the United Nations.
And that was the first time in the history of United Nations.
Oh yes, it was to have a Sufi, a real. There have been poetry readings and things, of I think that UNESCO at one time had declared a year of Rumi and Yunus Emri, poetry readings and presentations. But this wasn't a presentation.
This was a whole complete Urs ceremony.
This was not, wasn't it? This was you could have ceremonies and all sorts of things. What happened was the grace of God was there.
Yeah.
And people could feel it. And they were lifted up. Because that's what prayer is supposed to do. It lifts you up.
Yeah.
And everything that every art form can be done with the blessing of God. Music, singing, poetry. Of course, music, singing, and poetry is not God, but they can help remind us. Just like eating correctly, preparing your food consciously and asking Allah's blessing, not eating food that's not to be eaten, eating food that's healthy and caring. I think like we have these rules of halal and haram, but there's a lot of food today that people eat that are filled with chemicals. At the time of the Rasul, these chemicals didn't exist, and they didn't put them in food, right? You take water. There's lots of we didn't have chemicals in the water then. So the idea of we need to update we need to update what is halal and haram in the modern world. I don't think that it is healthy, therefore halal, to be eating food that causes cancer, that has chemicals in it that cause cancer, that were not natural to it. I don't think that nuclear weapons are halal because they have an indiscriminate effect on billions of innocent people.
That's right.
That's not acceptable to me.
That's right.
I don't think that's consistent. And yet, of course, my country originated it. Now I'm from the only country that's ever used it. But I'm like you. I'm first and foremost insan. I'm a human being. All of the other identities come after that. My first identity is a human being. And my first loyalty is to God, who's the God of all human beings. Not just the God of my deen or my religion or my faith or my path, but the God of all people, of all countries and all nations, of all times. So that's a different perspective. But I think that the virus that's hitting us now is reminding us that all the militaries and all the institutions of the world cannot protect us from a very, very tiny organism. And that the best way for us to move forward is to do it with human unity, to overcome the borders and differences we have and work together for the well-being of everyone. That's the message for the moment. Everyone has realized a sense of humility in our vulnerability. No matter how powerful your brain and your wealth, or how poor you are, you're equal to this virus, and you're equal to God. And God is called Allah, but the idea that you have to have the proper word for God, you can see back here is a lot of words about God, but God is not a word. God is not a noun. A noun has a beginning and an end. Does Allah have a beginning and end? Did something was Allah created by something else? Is there something outside of God that created God? Does God, so a noun can't be, nouns all have beginnings and ends. And is Allah a verb, that an object that does something that's active? No. So it's our concepts are inadequate. But what he tells us is our hearts can become organs of knowing. Our qalb become organs of, this is the Sufi path. Our qalb, through the heart. If the heart is pure, there's a different kind of knowing. And it's mysterious, and it's secret, and it's transformative. And the evidence of that heart is love. And the evidence of love is caring for others. And the evidence of caring for others is serving others. And the evidence of serving for others is a clear conscience. And the evidence of a clear conscience is inner peace. And the evidence of inner peace is wisdom. The evidence of wisdom is gratitude, because you know that you didn't make your life. You know that you didn't make your health. You know that you didn't make your family. You know that it's all gifted by Allah. And you know that you do not have your birth or your death in your hands, they're in His hands. And when you have that, you have gratitude. So a person with gratitude is so evident in the way they behave toward others, and the way they live. And that's the way you spread the deen. That's the way. It's not just in words, it's in being. So people who are full of anger and haste and arrogance and the pursuit of power over others, that's the evidence of a lack of gratitude, a lack of love, a lack of self-awareness. Instead, if you know yourself, you'll know your Rabb. People who don't know themselves are always trying to fix other people. They're always trying to fix other people. They're always blaming others why they're unhappy. Sufis are always thanking God to be alive. Are there Sufis in your part of the world?
Pardon?
Are there Sufis in your part of the world?
Oh, yes.
Well, imagine this. There are Sufis in America.
Oh, yes. Very vibrant Sufis.
You saw that, right?
Oh,
well,
yeah.
That must have been a surprise. Was that a surprise for you?
It was for me. And while visiting Philadelphia, I came to know that there is a shrine, a Sufi shrine there, and it is the biggest shrine of America, a Sufi shrine. And I was wondering if I could visit that shrine, and then I got the chance to visit the shrine, and then I got the chance to meet the community, fellowship, Bawas, and then I visited the Mosque of Bawa there in city of Philadelphia. And then I come to know all the followers and fellows of Baba's fellowship. And that was a wonderful experience. And then I guess if I have visited America 10 times, I have visited Baba's shrine 10 times.
Yes, well, it's truly, he had predicted this in the 1940s, that the tree would grow in the east and fall in the west and spread. Yes, his message, his example of living the universal message of all of the wise and showing us that Dinul Islam is not something that should cause separations in humanity, but should be a note that harmonizes. You know, in an orchestra, the tuning fork is so important, and the tuning fork is what harmonizes. All of the instruments can harmonize, and a human being who is harmonized with God, with Allah, helps humanity. And so he taught us to be comfortable in all religions.
Yeah.
And to see the wisdom in all religions. And to understand that in the Quran there's only 25 prophets mentioned, but Allah tells us there's 124,000.
Yes.
We don't really, and then we need to look a little bit deeper into things. What does he mean by the same message has been given to all of them? Let me give an example. If you're in the Arctic Circle and you want to do Ramadan and fast, and you're going to fast from sunrise to sunset, you'll only have one Ramadan. Because sunrise to sunset is about 5 months.
Yeah. So
right? So you can have a fast, but it has to be applied appropriately to the circumstances. Allah's not stupid. The idea is that you fast and die. The idea is that you fast and have compassion for people that don't have enough food, so you'll help. The idea is you'll realize your dependence upon God. But if you were to do it from sunrise to sunset in Greenland, right, you would die.
Definitely.
So we need to look at what is the meaning of this. What is the meaning of this? Was this message not also for the people of Greenland? The message of loving kindness and compassion and justice and beautiful adab? Was this only for people in Arabia? Of course not. Of course not. That's why he says 120. But so how is the message delivered there? How is it appropriate there? What are the principles that are there? So I have a principle that's good for this day and age that I don't think I hope somebody doesn't say it's bitta. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't think it is. I think this says a lot in a little, and though it's a new way of saying it. We have to first love God. And then as like unto that, as the prophet Jesus said, first love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And like unto that, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, and neighborhood now is a moral location. It's not physical. The whole planet. Well, I would say we have to love people and use things. Never love things and use people.
That's true.
Right?
So
then we have to think deeply, what are things? Things are objects that we can see, touch, feel, and hear, but things are also ideas that we have. So if our ideas cause us not to love, to stop us from loving people, we have to rethink our ideas. If our ideas cause us to become arrogant, prideful, we have to rethink our ideas.
Exactly.
But we have to use ideas to bring about greater love and human unity. As Khaja Muhaiyaddeen Chisti said, love toward all, malice toward none. As the life of Baba Farid exemplified, wherever he walked, it became sweet. That's the path that we have to follow. And if we find ourselves loving things and using people, then we know we've forgotten. But if we love people and use things, we can find a very, very easy path.
That's right. I'm so thankful, Brother Jonathan, for your time, for enlightening talk, which you gave us, a small interview, which needed to be continued, but we have some time restrictions. So I hope and I wish that in coming days we will have again a session with you and discuss other things which are left today.
Well, people should know that I wanted to have more of a dialogue with you, but you said you wanted me to like expound on these ideas. And I want to end with one thing. May the blessings of Allah's grace and love and wisdom and unity, the blessings of health, the blessings of peace, the blessings of gratitude, the blessings of patience, the blessings of mercy, the blessings of the secret of the soul, which is the nur itself, the light. May these blessings be bestowed generously on the people of Pakistan and the people of India and the people of America and all of the people in this one small planet floating in infinity, in infinite space, a place where all of the dramas of our lives are worked out, but they're very small. They're very small. We're very small. And if we have a little bit of humility, a little bit of bowing down, a little bit of sajada, a little bit of understanding, a little bit of letting go, a little bit of being human, and step back for a second and open our hearts, we'll see what a miracle our lives are. May that consciousness of the miracle of life help open our hearts so that we can receive the blessing of God's infinite love and the knowledge of the infinite love that is Allah, and that we might be those who tread on the path that is that direct the straight path within His blessing, and that we not be those who would forget, but that we be those who go on the journey, on the pilgrimage to the liberation, to the freedom of an open heart, and the freedom of the knowledge that the human being lives in God and God lives in us. All praises and all goodness and all being itself comes from God. May we be aware and be aware of this reality and live according to the love that He gives us in order to live. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hope to see you soon again, inshallah.
With you always. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.